Hi, everyone, and good evening. Welcome to day 52. Couple of things before we get rolling tonight. There are a couple of sections where I had to sort of go from outline to more little bits of script. So if you see me looking down, I'm reading more information than I typically do. Also, today's t-shirt, not the t-shirt. I just decided to wear the polyester tiger today because I like it. That's about it. Always feel free in the comments to say, well, today again, send me a picture of your t-shirts. I love really clever and ghastly ones. Okay.
8:16 p.m.
Today was a white day. Now, writing the script today, I realized that I've used these color terms a lot in these videos, but I haven't really explained them. So I want to touch on that for a moment, and it'll make sense as I go. See, each color represents a different focus for a day. And I'll get more into the details of why and how in a few. Briefly, I just have a few colors, and I really wish I was at the point where I could actually put a little slate or diagram in the video. I will, however, take credit for updating the thumbnail and getting an icon finally for the first 50 days. I'm off track. Okay, color. Green. I've talked about green days. Green days is where I am trying to acquire new stuff. I am trying to build something that I haven't really touched a lot. Now, that doesn't mean once I've gone through it, it's no longer construction. Construction is really until I feel a familiarity, but it's not necessarily falling into any kind of technique or modeling or possibly even emotional connection. It's just that general familiarity. So that would cover, right now, the octave hop in Be Prepared, and pretty much most of Brighter. So blue is sort of refinement. That's where I'm actually trying to figure out what do I need to turn, what do I need to move. That's really, it's not experimentation so much as it's trying to see the fine tuning, which leads us to yellow. Yellow is maintenance or stabilization, which basically means, for the most part, the rest of Be Prepared. I basically got that thing together, and now it's more a question of making sure it stays at that level or only goes up. But in general, it should be something I could walk away from for 2 or 3 days and then come back to later. Purple is the experimentation. I'll give you a good example of purple. Warming up with Be Prepared because I like the way it opened up to go in, Brighter. Warming up with Brighter to go into Boulevard. It was something I would not typically do, and I knew that it could just make everything go off the rails, but doing it was sort of a jump, and it yielded quite well. And of course, white. White is on the 7th day. He stopped singing for a few hours. It really is just a recovery day and a look back on the weekday. So we've got, if I break a white day down, it's when I'll assess, it's when I'll do the schedule for the next week. I will plan what is coming down the pike if I'm thinking of bringing something else in. Just sort of big picturing the week and deciding if I'm still on course, picking an entirely new course, or just wandering around staring at my navel. Honestly, today ended up becoming way more interesting, at least to me, than I really expected. Because originally, I was trying something practical. I made a chart. That's it. I should know better from the days that I was working with QA teams that charts can expose really scary things. But this is singing. That can't be that bad. I wanted to see where rehearsal sessions were landing next week because I was trying to understand why some types of days were hitting as often as I thought they would. Construction on Be Prepared. I obviously wanted to do more of that in the next week. And the calendars kept coming out wrong. And the chart, okay, even though I had already started trying to intentionally add these construction sessions, it still felt like it wasn't filling up. And I tried different ways and it just wasn't getting it. I kept winding up with like 7 boulevards and 3 Be Prepareds. And it didn't make sense. I mean, was it energy? Was it scheduling? Was I just getting tired of this project, tired of the planning project? But the more I looked at the chart, the strength of the whole thing became, because I realized the limitation wasn't what was happening at the session level. And it wasn't completely happening at the color definitions themselves. I had made their definitions too rigid. And that was kind of weird, because what it meant was I wasn't having my colors organized days, but they were basically falling into a pattern to set up a week. And as a result, the skittles that were my color organization were already sorted. And like a bad game of Gnomic, the rules that I made to sort them made it impossible to actually schedule a week that was different from how I had first designed it. This was one of those, once you see it, you can't unsee it moments. So the colors weren't broken. They were doing what I wanted. This was probably why I was completely missing the big picture. So I had designed my practices to keep me on track, that I would move forward in the right way. I was trying to push harder to push Be Prepared into the mix. And I kept running into invisible walls. The schedule basically, as sentiently as it could, looked back at me and said, nope, can't do it. Actually, my system is not sentient and did not tell me that I couldn't make that kind of week. Because if my happy little system had told me that, I probably would have made things a little easier and I would have gotten to it sooner. Calm, zen. But I fixed the whole system so certain colors shouldn't come next to each other in a certain order. Now, here's the whole reasons. I didn't want to overwork myself. And that's just not spending too much time on something, but hitting something too constantly that I'm losing focus on the creative side of it, or worse, overworking myself to the point where I'm beginning to hurt my throat. I didn't want to put myself in a situation where I was constantly getting frustrated, because all frustration does is I don't really want to work with that right now. And actually, I'm honestly having that problem with Boulevard, because it just keeps not completely clicking, and there is frustration. And of course, my little trick was to nurse my ADHD, I made sure things changed enough every day so that I wasn't getting bored. I think one of the weirdest parts of this whole project is realizing how many times this situation I'm in becomes you can't make the system do something it won't do. I have to have a better awareness of how it's all put together. And if you've been following the past couple of days, it's in singing, continuity, phrase linkage, and now it's in my scheduling system as well. So, time to take the apple apart again. So, since I knew I needed to start messing with all of my rules in my system, the software engineer that I'd been storing in the attic, had to be let loose again. And that side of me loved puzzles, especially software architecture. That was also the side of me that got all broke-like from long COVID. Things just didn't and don't come as easily as they used to. I used to be able to take a hard Sudoku and eat it in 5 minutes. Now, staring at an easy one, it's just like watching floating numbers dance. But honestly, I made this thing over about 2 or 3 weeks, so I was the only one who knew what it worked, what it was for, or even cared. I didn't have anybody I could turn to, so the rest of the day turned very slowly into me redesigning how a week is managed. And, okay, I knew I wasn't throwing away the colors because they did what they were supposed to do. What I really needed was the ability to have a different kind of weeks plannable. What I had done is build a system to keep me on track of how I was learning earlier in my process. But now I was getting to a point where varying my work would help me more. So, what I thought of was that some weeks may need to be more focused on construction than improvement. Some weeks may be exploratory, just trying to see if a piece that I am not doing yet feels like it might fit. I've actually now planned for academic weeks, and that sounds really boring, but part of this journey is for me to arrange music for a cappella groups, which I don't know. And I kind of realize after 52 days, I haven't touched it. Obviously, some is going to be stabilization or experimentation, or some mixture of them. But yeah, here's the software engineer in me. Having all these things written down, the back of my mind went, future-proof. And what that effectively is for those of you able to remember this, avoiding Y2K. Y2K was because they stored the year as a 2-digit number. All your flights and banking information, it started in 94 or 97. And Y2K was that fear that when we flip over, are the computer systems going to think the year is 2000 or are they going to think it's 1900? And the fear of airlines and banks becoming dangerous and unstable put everybody into a bit of a crazy fear that did not come to pass. That's future-proofing, is thinking ahead. What didn't I do the first time I planned this out? I said, this is the way it's going to work. But now I see it needs to work in different ways. So I have to think of a way, or think of how the system can stand up in a way that is resilient to new things that I hadn't thought of. So once I got my list together, everything started to actually click. Okay, hang on. I'm going to get a little techie and philosophical for a moment. That has always been how my brain works, but then throw in a bunch of Bugs Bunny cartoons as well. If the voice itself changes throughout the development process, depending on things like energy or fatigue or repetition, so many, continuity, then it makes sense that everything surrounding that voice and that voice process also needs to have other paths instead of treating it every week, the same way. So it was probably about this point with paper and an iPad and a laptop spread out before me like one giant landscape that one of the cats was probably going to think was a litter box. But one thought came to me as I was looking at everything spread out about in front of me. Just one crystal clear thought. I just wanted to make a chart. And I wanted to respond to the comments that have been coming in on the page. I'm still hoping I can get to the comments tonight after I post. That was it. So here I was basically trying to figure out where the hell is this all going? Several hours pass and magic had occurred. Magic is a accurate computer science term for I got in the zone and I don't remember in retrospect what it was that I did, but it worked. Everything had sort of changed. No, it didn't change. It evolved into weekly structures that could all be created with the system. Now, this was either a sign of very healthy growth, evidence that I'm increasingly unable to organize anything without eventually turning it into a major computer project, both, or I'm just nuts. Honestly, one of the healthiest things about today was that this wasn't a big emotional poof day. No revelations or epiphanies. Yeah, realizations, but nothing was. When the angels came down and went, "You have learned." I did not solve an octave hop. I did not get one of my old-fashioned dopamine hits. It was quieter. It simply was more like how I've gotten to this point where my voice has matured. I need to go back and mature the how I got here, because it was still thinking I was just starting out. And I think that was really important to get a grasp of. Not an epiphany. As long as the work I'm doing continues to get more sustainable and more opening paths to the plans that I have ahead, my process has to go beyond just survive tomorrow. I think today may have been one of the first days where I was seeing the journey, which I talk about all the time, but seeing the journey more along the lines of larger seasons of development instead of individual rehearsal days, which that's a really good point to hit when I'm going to make a touring a cappella group kind of suddenly devolved into maybe I'll learn a few notes and not embarrass myself. So, not the standard day that I normally do, but I am hoping that it will make everything I report in the upcoming week really kind of pop a little more, because I will be trying different things and different ways to train my voice. And like I said, we'll see how that goes. And that we includes you if you're watching, because it is good to have someone to share this with. I know I've gotten comments going, I have no idea what you're talking about, and that is more than fair. Most of the stuff I didn't know what I was talking about before I went there. And sometimes I think I'm making up some of this stuff, but it's working, so yay. So thank you for joining me on the journey. I can wrap up now. So tomorrow will be day 53 of a new week and a different kind of week. So until tomorrow's episode, later.